Okay, have you ever found yourself looking at maybe a big stack of articles or even a classic novel and just wishing you could, like, download all the key stuff, the important bits, the surprising details without spending weeks reading? I think we've all been there. You want to be informed, really get it, but it just feels like so much sometimes. Well, you've landed in exactly the right spot. Welcome to the deep dive. Think of us as your shortcut to being genuinely clued in, fast. We dive into the dense texts, the complex ideas, and we pull out those crucial nuggets, those aha moments, the facts that really connect the dots for you. It's not just a summary, it's more like a custom exploration designed, well, specifically for you. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really powerful, truly groundbreaking novel, Richard Wright's Native Son. This book came out in 1940, but wow, it still carries such a charge. It drops us right into Chicago during the Great Depression in the 1930s. And at its heart, it's the story of Bigger Thomas. He's a young African-American man just struggling against these huge, crushing societal forces. When it first came out, Native Son was, well, pretty controversial. But it very quickly became seen as this essential American classic, a book that really shifted things.
Absolutely. And what makes it so groundbreaking isn't just the story itself, but how Wright told it. He wasn't interested in, polite or easy narratives. He used Bigger's story as this raw, unflinching tool for really deep social commentary. He laid bare these uncomfortable truths about systemic injustice, about race, poverty, class struggle in America. And he did it with a kind of visceral intensity that was pretty rare back then. It really was like a literary earthquake. It challenged everyone, black and white readers, to confront the society they were living in.
Yeah, it definitely holds up. So for a deep dive today, we're going to unpack Bigger Thomas's life right at the beginning of the novel. Then we'll look closely at that tragic, pivotal incident that just changes everything for him. From there, we'll get into the trial that follows, which is so revealing in itself. And finally, we'll pull out those powerful, enduring themes that make this book still feel so relevant, so important today. So get ready. It's going to be an intense, but I think really enlightening journey into this masterpiece. Because let's really set the scene. Bigger Thomas. When we first meet him, what's his world like? He's 20 years old, African-American, and living in just suffocating poverty on Chicago's South Side. And this isn't just like background detail. It defines everything for him. We're talking the Black Belt of the 1930s. It was this segregated, overcrowded area where the promise of moving north, the Great Migration, had kind of soured into really limited opportunities, constant discrimination. His world is literally this tiny, cramped apartment he shares with his mother, his brother, his sister. And the book opens with them hunting a rat in the room, which is just this brutal metaphor for their daily struggle, right? Just trying to survive.
hmm And it's so important to grasp Bigger's internal state from page one. It's not just about the lack of money. His whole being is shaped by this deep, gnawing fear and frustration, this crushing sense that there's no real opportunities for him. Wright does an incredible job showing how Bigger feels completely trapped in a society structured to oppress him simply because of his race and social status. That feeling isn't just background, it's the engine driving him. You see him dreaming about flying planes, right? Fantasizing about having some power, some agency. But the world constantly reminds him, white society reminds him, that those dreams are impossible for someone like him. This feeling of being cornered with no room to move, no space to even breathe, it's absolutely central to understanding everything he does later.
It really does make you stop and consider the sheer weight of that. Starting life under such relentless pressure, that complete lack of agency, the feeling that your future is already decided by your skin color, by your poverty. It's almost, yeah, unbearable right from the start. Okay, so now we get to the point where things take a really chilling turn. The turning point in Bigger's life. He actually manages to get a job, which seems like a step up. It's with the Daltons, this wealthy white family. And on the surface, they seem like the picture of, progressive liberalism. They support black charities, they fund education stuff, they present themselves as enlightened. Bigger gets hired as their chauffeur. And this job puts him right up close to a world that's totally alien and, frankly, unsettling for him. And the daughter, Mary Dalton, she plays a really key role here. She and her boyfriend, who's politically active, they seem to represent this younger generation wanting to challenge societal norms. So they deliberately try to interact with Bigger, break down racial barriers, show how progressive they are. But doing that, even if they mean well, it puts Bigger in this incredibly awkward and vulnerable spot.
Right. And that interaction with the Daltons is so complex, it's really central to Wright's critique. Because while they think they're allies, their actions often have this undertone of paternalism. Maybe tokenism, like they own the very segregated housing Bigger lives in, yet they give money to Black organizations.
Wow, I didn't realize that connection.
Yeah, their liberalism lets them feel good, but it doesn't really challenge the system they benefit from. Or, crucially, the deep discomfort and fear their actions cause in Bigger. Mary's attempts to socialize with him, forcing him to drive her and her boyfriend to Black restaurants, trying to talk politics with him, it's all deeply unsettling for Bigger. He's painfully aware of these racial lines, lines that, if he crosses them, could mean disaster for him.
And it's exactly that pressure, isn't it? That crossing of unspoken, dangerous boundaries, that leads directly to the accident. One night, he's driving Mary and her boyfriend, Jan. Mary gets very drunk. Bigger has to help her get back to her room undetected. And then, in this moment of just escalating panic, he's trying to keep her quiet so her blind mother doesn't hear them. He accidentally smothers her. It's completely unintentionally. Just a terrible collision of fear, circumstance, bad judgment. But the result is catastrophic.
And that moment defines everything that follows. And it brings up that immediate, terrifying question. Why doesn't he just report it? Why hide it? His decision to hide her body, to try and cover it all up, it's driven purely by this ingrained primal fear of being caught as a Black man in white society. He knows with absolute certainty that it doesn't matter if it was an accident. He'd instantly be branded a rapist, a murderer. He understands that in this racist system, his truth, his word, means nothing against the potential accusation involving a white woman. It's this deep terror born from generations of injustice that forces him into these desperate, increasingly illogical choices. And that spirals him down into this inescapable mess of guilt and despair and eventually even more violence.
What really strikes you about that fear, it's not just being scared in the moment, it's this deep systemic terror, so ingrained that it completely overrides logic. It's the certainty that the system itself is rigged against him, that the truth won't save him, and that pushes him into making everything so much worse. So inevitably, this internal terror leads to external actions, things unravel, Bigger is caught. And the novel then shifts focus pretty dramatically to his trial. What does that shift signify for the story?
Well, connecting it to that bigger picture we were talking about, the trial becomes much more than just, finding out if Bigger is guilty. It explodes into this huge public spectacle. And in doing so, it just ruthlessly exposes the systemic racism and hypocrisy in the American justice system. Wright isn't just describing courtroom procedures. He's dissecting how the legal system itself is turned into a weapon against Bigger. His lawyer, Boris Max, he's a communist lawyer, he tries to argue that Bigger isn't just some monster. He argues Bigger is a product of the very society that now condemns him, a society full of racial oppression, economic despair.
Try to provide context, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. Context, humanization. But that argument, it pretty much falls on deaf ears. Wright shows brilliantly how Bigger becomes a scapegoat for the oppression and fear ingrained in white America. The media depicts him as this savage beast, right? The embodiment of all white fears about Black men. So the trial stops being about the actual facts of Mary's death. It becomes this public justification for maintaining the racist social order.
Wow.
It really forces you to question the whole idea of justice when race is such a determining factor, when it shapes the entire narrative before the trial even starts.
Exactly. It's such a powerful indictment. It shifts from what Bigger did in that moment of panic to what society did to Bigger long before that moment, and how the justice system itself just perpetuates that oppression. Okay, so beyond the plot, which is obviously gripping, Native Son is just packed with these really potent themes that still hit hard today. Let's dig into some of those key ones.
Absolutely. I think the most central has to be racial oppression. Wright gives us this absolutely unforgiving picture of how systemic racism shapes every single aspect of Bigger's life and decisions. Everything, from where he can live, the jobs he can get, basically only service jobs, to how the police see him, how everyone sees him.
Yeah, right.
His whole reality is just fenced in, distorted by this constant, inescapable racism. He knows deep down that his life is valued less than a white person's, and that knowledge just twists everything for him.
And flowing right out of that oppression is the theme of fear and alienation. It's almost suffocating how much fear permeates the book.
Oh, completely. Bigger is just constantly, agonizingly afraid. His biggest actions, especially the ones around the tragedy, are fundamentally driven by fear of white people, fear of poverty, fear of a society that sees him as inherently inferior and dangerous. It's not just nervousness. It's this deep existential terror. It infects every thought. He feels like a total outsider,
Yeah.
Alienated from white society, obviously, but sometimes even from his own family, because they can't really grasp the depth of his anger, his despair, that isolation, that feeling of being other, of being seen as a threat. It's just central to his tragedy. He feels utterly alone against this massive force.
And then there's the critique of social injustice.
Yeah.
Wright isn't just talking about individual racist acts. He's taking aim at the whole system, right? Capitalism, and especially that so-called liberalism of people like the Daltons.
Yes, that's such a sharp insight in the book. Wright expertly reveals how white liberal attitudes often mask deep-seated racial prejudice. The Daltons think they're doing good with their charity, but their actions, maybe unintentionally, just reinforce the racial hierarchy they say they oppose.
Because they benefit from it?
Precisely. They're blind to their own complicity. Their attempt to sort of understand Bigger is so superficial, they never see him as a full person, just as like an object for their charity work. And that critique broadens out to the capitalist structure itself. It shows how poverty isn't just bad luck. It's kind of a built-in feature of a system that needs marginalized populations to function, which forces people like Bigger into these desperate corners.
And the last major theme, one that really makes you think, is identity and self-perception. Bigger's struggle with who he is. It's intense.
It really is perhaps the deepest tragedy.
Beautiful.
Bigger is
or
constantly
worthy.
fighting against these dehumanizing stereotypes that white society throws at him. And he internalizes some of it too, right? He starts seeing himself through their fearful eyes. Paradoxically, his acts of violence are sometimes shown as this desperate, really misguided attempt to just feel real, to assert his existence, even if it confirms the very stereotypes society has of him.
That's chilling.
It reflects that larger existential conflict about the role of Black Americans in a segregated society. How do you build a sense of self, of worth, when the world constantly tells you you're less than human? It raises that huge question for all of us, you know? How much are our actions, our identities shaped by the society around us? How much freedom do we really have to define ourselves against those pressures?
Native Son really is just this incredibly powerful, unflinching social commentary. It forces you as a reader to face these uncomfortable truths about racial injustice, about the fears that fuel it.
It absolutely is. And you mentioned earlier, it was super controversial when it came out. The violence, the way it challenged those polite narratives about race, the fact that Bigger wasn't presented as this sort of respectable Black character. It shocked a lot of people, Black and white critics included.
I can imagine.
But the impact was immediate and undeniable. It got huge attention, and it really played a massive role in bringing African-American literature and social realism into the mainstream. It showed experiences and voices that had been pushed to the margins for so long, right? Basically just kicked the door down for future generations of Black writers to explore these complex realities with total honesty.
A true trailblazer.
Definitely.
Right.
And its relevance, it hasn't faded at all. Decades on, the novel continues to provoke discussions about race, justice, and human dignity. That makes it absolutely essential reading if you want to understand the ongoing complexities of these issues in America, and really anywhere. The themes are, sadly, still so current.
So you've just taken this deep dive with us into Richard Wright's Native Son. We've pulled out what we feel are its most vital insights, explored its really profound and lasting message. In this novel, it's more than just a story you read. It's a challenge. It challenges you, the listener, to confront uncomfortable truths about systemic inequality and the human cost of oppression. It pushes us all to look past individual actions and see the bigger societal forces at play. So, thinking about Bigger's story, these powerful themes of fear, alienation, systemic injustice, maybe a final thought to leave you with is, how can we, in our own lives today, get better at recognizing and maybe addressing the subtle ways and sometimes the not-so-subtle ways that these societal structures still shape individual lives, still limit opportunities, even when we think we've moved past the kind of blatant injustice Wright depicted? Something to reflect on. We really encourage you to think about the enduring power of this story. Maybe check out other works by Richard Wright or contemporary writers who are tackling similar vital themes. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring the world around you.